All right, everybody. Chapter 5, we are finally on lesson 6. We only have this one and one more to go. And these are my favorite two lessons because they both involve graphing on the coordinate plane. I think you're really going to like these last two lessons. Okay, crazy pictures. My first job, get that, $6 an hour. I worked in the kitchen at Hawk Hollow. And yeah, Tom Izzo came there one day, so we got our picture taken with him. And my first car, a 1983 Tornado, bought it for $1,200. Look at that baby. Wow. Okay, picture time done. Moving on to the math. So we are at lesson 6, page 395. And the learning objective is I can locate ordered pairs, quadrants, and reflections on the coordinate plane. So we are going to look at the 4 quadrants, whereas before, earlier in the year, we only looked at this section right here. We're adding the negative numbers too. So, maps. The map shows the layout of a small town. The locations of buildings are described in respect to the town hall. Each unit on the grid represents one block. Describe the location of the barber shop in relation to the town hall. So if this is the town hall and this is the barber shop is how many blocks away? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks east. So the shop is 5 blocks east of the hall. What building is located 7 blocks east and 5 blocks north of the town hall? 7 blocks east, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 5 blocks north, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the firehouse. Violetta is at the library. Describe how many blocks and in what direction she should travel to get to the supermarket. So she's at the library, which is right here, and she needs to travel to the supermarket, which is right here. So she's going to need to go east and south. So how many blocks east? 1, 2, 3 blocks east and 1, 2, 3 blocks south. All right, so 3 blocks east and 3 blocks south. Number 4, Town Hall and the bank are both located on the same vertical number line. So Town Hall and the bank, they're on this vertical number line. The number 0 represents the location of Town Hall on the number line. What number represents the location of the bank? Well, if the town hall is 0, then the bank would be 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's go ahead and turn to the first page here. On this side, we're going to be identifying points in ordered pairs. And on this side, we're going to talk about reflections. So remember, the name of this is, well, the coordinate plane, but our learning objective is locating ordered pairs, quadrants, and reflections. So this is the ordered pairs and quadrants. This is the reflections. A coordinate plane is formed when the x-axis and y-axis intersect at their 0 points. So this is the 0 point. This is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. And the axes separate the coordinate plane into 4 regions called quadrants. You can use the location on the plane or use the x coordinates and y coordinates to identify the quadrant in which a point is located. So the quadrant that we're most familiar with is quadrant 1. And then the quadrant numbers go counterclockwise, so the opposite way of a clock. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Quadrant 1 has both x and y coordinates positive. Quadrant 2 has negative x, positive y. Quadrant 3 has both negative. And quadrant 4 is positive x, negative y. Now, let's look at some examples of locating points here. Ordered pairs. A point located on the x-axis will have a y-coordinate of 0. So if it's on the x-axis, like right here, it's going to be negative 3, and then the y would be 0. So a point located on the y-axis would have an x-coordinate of 0. So down here, it would be 0, then negative 3. Points located on an axis are not in any quadrant. So anytime you have a point on this axis or the x-axis, it's not in a quadrant. You have to be somewhere out here off the axis to be considered in a quadrant. Here are some things that we need to remember. All right, remember. First, you need to remember that in an ordered pair, it goes x, then y. So that's number one. The second thing you need to remember is the origin is 0, 0. The third thing you need to remember is positive numbers are to the right and up. Negative numbers are to the left and down. So looking at this axis, this coordinate plane here, positive numbers are to the right and up. Negative numbers are to the left and down. This is the origin 0, 0. So up here, if you had a point on the x-axis, like 1, 0, it would be located x-coordinate 1, and then 0, you'd stay right there for the y-coordinate. Or a point located on the x-axis would have an x-coordinate of 0, so like 0, 3. So 0 means you stay here, and then to go up 3 on the x-axis. That's why they're saying the point would be on the y-axis. Number 1, identify the ordered pair that names point C, then identify the quadrant in which it is located. So, C says start at the origin, move right on the x-axis. So when you move right on the x-axis, you know that this is at 1.5. So the x-coordinate is 1.5. Step 2, you move up the x-axis, or up the y-axis, and the y-coordinate takes you up here, and that's at 1. So the y-coordinate is 1. Therefore, you write that ordered pair x comma y, so 1.5 comma 1. That's where point C is located. And it is in quadrant 1. So that's where both x and y values are positive. That's the place we're most familiar with. Let's do this one. Identify the point located at negative 1.5, negative 1, then identify the quadrant it's in. So start at the origin, move left on the x-axis to negative 1.5. So here's the origin. Go x, negative 1.5, then move down the y-axis for negative 1. So coming down to negative 1. Now, it's got to be point B that they're talking about. And then what quadrant is it in? Quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3. Remember, start where you're most familiar and go counterclockwise. So point B is in quadrant 3. Now we're going to try it over here on page 397. Identify the ordered pair that names point A, then identify the quadrant where it's located. So A, x first. So it's negative 1 for x, and then y is up to 1.5. So negative 1, 1.5. And what quadrant is it in? This is 1, 2. All right. B, identify the point located at 1, -2, then identify the quadrant. So, x-axis, 1, y to -2. So that would be point E, and it's in quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're talking E in quadrant 4. Okay, so that's locating points on the coordinate plane and locating what quadrant those ordered pairs are in. Now we're going to talk about reflections. So it says, you can use what you know about number lines and opposites to compare locations on the coordinate plane. Consider the number line and coordinate plane below. The number line shows that -4 and 4 are opposites. So basically, reflection is another word for opposites. It's just instead of having one number line here, we're going to have these two x and y axis, and so it's going to be ordered pairs that are going to be reflecting. So let's make a little star over here. Reflection is another word for opposite. Now I'm going to give you a tip here. The tip is when you reflect across the x-axis, so let's just say we have 2, 2. When you reflect across the x-axis, it's 2, -2. If you reflect it over here across the y-axis, then it's going to be -2, 2. So when we reflect it across the x-axis, the y number was opposite. When we reflect it across the y-axis, the x number is opposite. So let's write this tip out so we can refer back to it throughout this page. All right. So when reflecting across the x-axis, the x-coordinate number stays the same. The y-coordinate number becomes an opposite. Now the next part. So when you reflect across the y-axis, the y-coordinate stays the same and the x-coordinate is the opposite. This says right here, the coordinate plane shows that the points -4, 0 and 4, 0 are the same distance from the y-axis in opposite directions, so they're reflected across the y-axis. Notice that the y-coordinates did not change and that the x-coordinates are opposites. So this is on a number line. 4 and -4 are opposites. This is on the coordinate plane. 4, 0, -4, 0. So when you go across the y-axis, that y value stayed the same. The x one became opposite. Example 3. Name the ordered pair that's a reflection of -3, 2 across the x-axis. So we have -3, 2. You're reflecting it across the x-axis, so the x value will stay the same, but that y will become an opposite. This says to reflect across the x-axis, keep the same x-coordinate, -3, and take the opposite of the y-coordinate, which would be -2. So -3, 2 reflected across the x-axis is located at -3, -2. Now, let's do that here. Name the ordered pair that's a reflection of each point across the x-axis. So, the x-axis means the x-coordinate is going to stay the same. So in all of these right here, this will stay the same. And the y value is going to become opposite. So the opposite of -4, the opposite of 5, and the opposite of -1. So if you look here, 1, -4 across the x-axis becomes 1, 4. -2, 5 across the x-axis down here would be -2, -5. And then -3, -1 reflecting across the x-axis would be -3, 1. So those three all make sense. Let's write them in over here. And let's go to the next page. Example 4. Kendall is building a square fence. She places fence posts at the locations indicated on the grid. What is the location of the post that reflects -4, 4 across the y-axis? So this one, -4, 4, reflecting across the y-axis would put it right here. So to reflect across the y-axis, keep the same y-coordinate, 4, and the opposite of the x-coordinate, -4, would be 4. So the reflection is here at 4, 4. Kendall also placed a fence post at -4, -4. So that would be down here. What is the location of the post that reflects -4, -4 across the y-axis? So y-axis would stay the same. X-axis would be opposite. Let's see if that makes sense. 4, -4. All right, let's pair up and practice some more in the guided practice. All right, make sure that you have a partner. Get some help if you don't have a partner. And we are going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in 1, 2, and 3, identify the ordered pair that names each point or the name of each point, and then identify the quadrant. So we're doing two things here, the ordered pair of the point and then the quadrant that it's located in. Go ahead and do 1, 2, and 3, and then check your answers with the video. So T is located at -1.5, -2. And the quadrant that it's in, 1, 2, 3. -1.5, 0. Let's see, -1.5 and then 0 is K. And since that is on the axis line, it's not in a quadrant. So no quadrant. -2, 2.5. -2 and then +2.5, that would be B, and that's located in quadrant 1, 2. All right, let's go to number 4. Refer to the diagram of a school over here. What is located at the reflection of -3, -4 across the y-axis? So -3, -4, and then reflected across the y-axis. So here's this. Here's the y-axis. We have to reflect it over here. So that would be the gym at 3, -4. Okay, now, does this make sense? It's going across the y-axis, so the y value stays the same and the x value is opposite. What is located at the reflection of the science labs across the x-axis? So science labs jump across the x-axis. That would be the art studio. And what are the coordinates for that? So it would be -3 and then 2. Let's do some independent practice more on our own. Okay, for independent practice today, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 12, and then all of 13 here. So it looks like a lot, but it's going to go really fast. Go for it. All right, let's take a look here. So R was located at 2, 2 in quadrant 1. G was at 2, 5 in quadrant 1. B was -4, 2 in quadrant 2. T, -3, -2 in quadrant 3. By the way, C, 5, 0, no quadrant. We should have just done them all, let's be honest. 4, -3 in quadrant 4 was where point A was. Now down here, this was point Z in quadrant 2, F in quadrant 1, A in quadrant 4, R in quadrant 4, Q in quadrant 3, and this one right here, if you did it, -1/2 and 0, that would have been N in no quadrant. Now for the fun part, I love these little maps. Origin is here, so the clock is closest to the origin. If Liza is at 2, 4, what is located across the x-axis? That would have been the wonder wheel at 2, -4. And the reflection of 3, 1 across the y-axis would be the big coaster here at -3, 1. And then the pipeline plunge is reflected across the x-axis. So pipeline plunge right here. What are the coordinates of its new location? So that's going to be -1 and then -2. On to the reflection. All right, so learning objective F, locating ordered pairs, quadrants, and reflections on the coordinate plane. So number 1 on the coordinate plane, label the 4 quadrants and label the x and y axis. Number 2, in an ordered pair, the first number represents the blank axis, the second number represents the blank axis. Positive numbers are found to the left or right or up or down from the origin, and negative numbers are found left or right or up or down from the origin. Another word for reflection is what? On the coordinate plane to the left, A is in quadrant blank and give its points, its ordered pair. The letter in quadrant 1 at 2, 2 is point what? The reflection of point B across the x-axis is, and the reflection across the y-axis is. So we're reflecting point B across the x-axis, bam, and then across the y-axis. All right, you did it.